you go up to Benezet, up to the visitor center, up to the touristy kind of elk viewing areas. Those elk see hundreds and not thousands of people a day, and nobody's shooting at them. Nobody's giving them a hassle or a hard time. So they do become habituated. I don't know if I don't like to use the term tame, but
Yeah.
habituated, but conversely, those elk do need managed and controlled also. So sometimes there are tags awarded in zones that aren't the most picturesque, when you envision what an elk hunt would be. But from a management standpoint, those elk still need to be managed. They still need to be harvested. And any sort of hunting pressure on those animals, whether it's realized instantly or not, does to a certain level put the fear of man into them a little bit. When Jeremy originally had instituted the archery in the late season, one of the side effects he was hoping, aside from providing more opportunity, he was hoping to create a little bit more of a human fear into some of these cases that we talked about by hunting pressure. These people now all of a sudden, well, these guys aren't shooting at us just for 1 week out of the year. Now they're here 3 different times out of the year, and maybe we should be a little bit more wary and a little bit more, cautious of where we're feeding and out in the open. And I don't know how you quantify that. I mean, I think you talk to some people, they say, hell no, that didn't do nothing. You talk to other people and they say, yeah, I think I've noticed a difference. I know, and just in the last 4 or 5 years alone, just from harvest success, I mean, there's some zones that used to be 100% success rate on cows. Now they struggle to get 40 and 50%. It's a combination of a few things, but I would like to think that multiple seasons of hunting pressure, plays a little bit of a role in that, and kind of, makes them a little more weary, puts the fear in them a little bit more, so elk act more like elk, and then when you're up there in Benezet in that visitor center area, especially during the rut, that's the peak time. Hundreds of thousands of folks come through there. It's during the rut. I mean, the bulls are crazy. They're quite frankly stupid at that time. I mean, they got one thing on their mind. They don't care about anything else. So sometimes that gives a false impression. And specifically, with bulls, I've seen this multiple times. I've seen bulls come out. I've seen them summer in some of those more remote areas where there's nobody around, and they drop off the top into the valleys around some of these other viewing areas and popular elk-looking areas. And when out in velvet, up where they were in the summertime, they catch wind of you, poof, they're gone. But now here they are in September, with drool hanging out of their mouth, and they're just staring right at a pickup truck because you're in the way of his cows on the other side of the road. He doesn't care. That's all he's thinking about. So, I've said this multiple times to a lot of folks, and I believe it holds true. Our elk especially, elk know where they should see people. When you're down in town and bulls are eating in a yard or in a farm field or something, and they're used to a line of vehicles out along the road stopped and looked at them and nothing ever happens, they know that. But you're out in Quiana somewhere and you come up out of a valley and up bump onto this oak bench and there's a herd of elk there. They know right away there ain't supposed to be people here, and they act totally different. I bet a paycheck on it. I know it because I've seen it, and it happens all the time.
Yeah.
They know where they're supposed to see people and where they're not supposed to. And when you're not supposed to be there, they're alert. They're on you. Something they don't like, they're gone. And that's where you can get into some really good hunting experiences. Where you're hunting, where you're digging. And you gotta find them.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. And one story I want to hear about. So for anyone that's not familiar with elk in Pennsylvania, you mentioned a couple times 400-inch mark, which if any. That is an absolute giant elk. I mean, that's some of the biggest elk in the country. But I remember getting a photo sent to me, I believe it was 2020. There was this big non-typical, I believe that you guys had guided shot. Yes, like sir. It was like 460 something. Is that correct?
Yep. So that bull is the current Pennsylvania state non-typical record. He was gross 467 and 7/8, I believe, and he nets 455 even. Just a monstrosity. It's actually it is the 4th largest hunter-killed elk in the world, and on the Boone and Crockett list, it falls in as number 6. So Sixth largest. So the reason it is not number 4, even though it's the fourth largest hunter killed, it's not number 4 on the B&C list. There's 2 bulls bigger than him that were found as deadheads and picked up as deadheads. So Boone and Crockett still recognizes those 2 animals. So they score higher than him. Therefore, they hold a higher spot in the Boone and Crockett record book. But overall, he's the 4th largest hunter killed elk in the world. And just a monster. I mean, just unbelievable. I believe that bull had nearly 80 inches of non-typical antler, aside from his regular typical frame. And then conversely, last year, we killed a new state record typical. We actually killed a bull that's gross is 432 and change as a 6x6 typical, and net's 407. 407 and 2/8 as a 6x6. It is just that's a unit. I mean, that's a unicorn anywhere, but for Pennsylvania, when our bulls, that bull, and I think that bull was 9 years old. Yeah, 9 years old. When our bulls, for whatever reason, our genetics, when our bulls get old into that mature window, that 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, even 12-year window, we get trashy, man. We get junky. We get splits off of splits. We get drop tines. We get webbing. For this bull to grow a big, huge 6-point frame is just incredible. He had 2 little kickers, one on the left side 4th and the left side 5th. And we actually, I mean, when you look at paperwork, it actually, it hurt. I think we lost about 7 inches. Because that's being a typical score, those are non-typical inches. They actually come off when we're figuring the net. So really, I mean, if he would have been totally slick and not had those 2 little kickers, we'd have been talking about a typical net 14s bull, It's just giant. I mean, as a 6x6 frame, our previous state record in Pennsylvania was another Elk County Outfitters client, and that was a 388 and 1/8 net bull, and that was a 7x7. 7 typical points. So I mean, this dude crushed the previous record, and he had less scoreable points. He only had a 6x6 frame. So it really is just it's incredible. The bulls that are out there. Not to get too far back, but the elk hunt started in 2001. The modern day elk hunt in Pennsylvania, 2001. Prior to that, elk hadn't been hunted for 70 years. Elk were dying of old age. I mean, any logical thinker would think, well, hell, that first year, 2001, every bull killed should have been 400 inches, right? They were all over the landscape out there. They weren't. They weren't taken. They weren't killed. And I think we can attribute that to a lot of different things, a lot of different social factors, and a lot of the way the guys hunt. But it took until 2004, I believe it was, for the first 400-inch gross bull to show up in the elk harvest. And now, ever since then, every year, it's progressed to where we're at now. And a lot of folks say, well, you're shooting all the big bulls, Well, yeah, we're shooting big bulls, but there's still a lot out there. There's still a lot of up-and-comers every year that are replacing them. Tag allocations have been fluctuating. Mentioned earlier about tags have been going up. This year they actually cut them a little bit, based on the aerial survey and based off of a calf mortality survey that recently finished up. So they actually lowered the cow allocation and bumped the bull allocation up. So overall, we have less tags, and that falls under the cow category. But they actually bumped up the bull tag allocation by 5. I believe 5 overall. So there's a lot of animals out there. They're constantly expanding too. I mean, there's elk as far north and east as Potter and the southern tip of western Tioga County, and they're down in Center County also. I mean, the Game Commission tries to use Route 80 as a physical barrier, but elk do routinely, every year cross Route 80, but that's not where they want them. And then you're getting into a lot more agriculture area. You deal with a lot more conflict and a lot more social acceptance issues down there, which, I mean, you could go down a whole big rabbit hole of what all that means, but I know we don't want to get that far in the weeds, but, elk they're still expanding. They're expanding their range. They're looking a lot more closely now at population dynamics, just like I said, with the lower numbers counted during the flyover this winter, and then the results of that calf mortality survey. But in general, the elk range is expanding, and that's the natural movement that the Game Commission is looking for, is that northeast. They want to get up into Potter County more and Tioga County more, where there's vast amounts of public ground and there's less chance of human conflict,
Yeah.
and social unacceptance, which is the big thing. Farm agriculture. I mean, that's one of the biggest hits. I mean, there are some farms in the elk range, and quite frankly, the farmers do not tolerate elk. I mean, you even think a bear does damage in a cornfield. You should see what a herd of 20 elk does.
Yeah.
I mean, they'd just be totally wiped out. I mean, the farmers take huge financial losses, and they're within their legal right, to dispatch elk just the same as elk and deer, for crop damage. And a couple farmers I know I talked to, they don't want to. They don't wake up every morning like, yeah, I can't go wait to shoot an elk on crop damage. They don't want to do it, but they just can't sustain the losses and the damage that comes from the trouble that elk can cause when you're making your living, or a big portion of your living, off of your land. It's a tough scenario to be in, and that's why they want the elk to go north and east. They don't want them to go south anymore, or west even anymore, or straight east even more. They're looking for that northeast natural expansion through natural causes and habitat work. So
Yeah.
There's always something going on out there. Population dynamic wise, there's always something going on food and cover wise in the elk range. Trying to benefit the elk herd long term, and sportsmen and elk hunters.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's awesome, and I love seeing how the elk seasons have progressed, and getting, everyone knows, about the big elk in Pennsylvania, which is awesome, but just the idea that we have elk is so cool in Pennsylvania, and hunters play a huge role in the management aspect of that, and anybody knows, across the country how hunting helps management. It seems counterproductive when you think you're shooting an elk to help them, but at the same time you are, and you got to keep them under control. So I think that's awesome.